So hello, I'm Simon O'Connell, the CEO of SNV, a global development partner striving to contribute as much as we can to enable more equitable lives for all by transforming the agri-food, energy and water systems. And I'm really delighted to be here today because we're going to be talking about those agri-food systems in particular. And we're joined by three really fabulous women with in-depth subject knowledge. So Jessica Anderen, the CEO of the IKEA Foundation, Jacqueline Novogratz, the founder and CEO of Acumen, and Dr. Agnes Kalibata, the president of AGRA. So warm welcome to the three of you, and thank you so much for joining us. I think maybe just to kick us off, and if I may, if we take off our own entity hats just for 1 minute, I think probably we can all agree that we share a desire, right, to see inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food systems. But with the framing of this week being around that big word of sustainability, I think we can also probably agree amongst the four of us that from almost any metric that you look at, right, from food insecurity levels in large parts of Africa to nutrition or nutritional inadequacy stemming from monocropping or lack of dietary diversity, to inequities in distribution of labor and profits, and perhaps, burdens of risk and where they reside, and of course climate impacts, with agri-food systems contributing around 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions. We can acknowledge, can't we, that the current food system is broken and really not sustainable. And that framing of this week's discussion, as I said, is indeed sustainability. So clearly something needs to be done and some things need to change. And on the positive front, we're seeing a growing movement around regenerative agriculture. Yes, perhaps the nomenclature could be sharpened, and yes, there are differing degrees of dogma, but there's an increasing body of evidence of the positive impacts of adopting more regenerative practices. It's also clear that there's both an urgent need and a great opportunity here to optimize circularity, to increase diversification, to mitigate risks, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to minimize water, soil, and air pollution, and to increase access to finance, and perhaps even to break down silos. And all of those, at least as I see it, are, core elements of what we mean by regenerative practices. So I'm looking forward to a fabulous discussion and hugely grateful for our time together. Jessica, I'm going to start with you first, if I may. So, you're the CEO of the IKEA Foundation. What do you see as the opportunities within the agri-food energy nexus space, so that breaking down of silos that I was just referring to? What do you see as the opportunities and the role that the IKEA Foundation can play in really facilitating interventions in this space? And how do we get to those all-important pathways of scale?
Thank you, Simon. A very important topic and very important question. Food and energy systems are fundamentally connected, and that's how we are looking upon it, because we see the interaction between the social, economic, and environmental implication, and it's critical that we connect the two in order to really lead and drive climate change. But it's all about the collaboration, right? And I think as a IKEA Foundation, a value-based, curious, and connected philanthropy, we have a very important role to play, and it's threefold. First of all, we need to be courageous, and we need to use our precious capital to really support the catalytic work together with our partners. And of course, now I'm sitting here with two very important partners of ours, with Acumen and SNV, and that I think is really one very important role that we need to continue doing in order to really drive the change we wish to see. The second role is about being the networker and the convener to really put all actors together from government all the way to entrepreneurs and everybody in between. And the third part is to seek program and partners that are really focusing on putting the end user in the core of the solution that we wish to see in order to really drive sustainable change. I think when you talk about scale and the opportunities, yes, it's a lot around the scale, but it's also we need to accelerate what works, because it's probably less innovation and more focusing on really good examples that we have out there that we've really been working on, that we're going to also hear more about in this session. But it's also to leverage on the momentum of COP28. It's to really address the accountability and also who's responsible for what, and really make all the actors in the ecosystem taking the real responsibility, having a real role, goal in the space where we need to move this. But I think the success lies within the ability, how we involve the people closest to the problems. Here, for example, with the farmers, that we listen, we learn, adapt, and act in order to really focus on the real needs and really create the solution that is necessary to make that work.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So we love what the IKEA Foundation does around convening, and what you said there really about convening the right voices, the right people around the table. So that really resonates. Jacqueline, turning to you as a real global leader in impact investing, and particularly across agriculture and renewable energy portfolios, how have you found ways to get patient financial flows to those who need it most, and particularly to enable those people to adopt more regenerative agriculture practices?
Thanks, Simon. It's so great to be here with you and Agnes and Jessica. Jessica couldn't have started us off more powerfully around the need for partnership, to focus on the farmers, to know what role each of us play. And IKEA Foundation has been an incredible partner to us, because we believe in business as a powerful tool for change. And to your question, we also understand that we need to think more innovatively in actually how we utilize capital to solve some of our toughest problems. You've mentioned it, but we've been investing at the nexus of climate and poverty with a specific focus on energy and ag for more than 20 years. And we have seen the mismatch between what it actually takes to make markets work for the poor and the type of financing available. So I want to just touch on three things, Simon. First is the need to understand, as Jessica said, the farmers we are here to serve, as well as our company's purpose. Increasingly, you're seeing companies in the agriculture space focus on regenerative agriculture. The farmers have very little income, and it takes a long time, 7 to 10 growing seasons, to actually make the transformation to regenerative. With very little income and a long time horizon, without a market premium, means that the farmers are particularly hard hit by climate events. So when it comes to capital, we have to think about how to structure it along a spectrum of capital. And I think what is most needed most, and a word that we often do not like hearing when it comes to low-income markets, but we're more comfortable with it when it comes to Europe and the United States, North America, is subsidy. If we start by focus on the problem that we're trying to solve rather than the capital that we have at our disposal, we can do this. At Acumen, we use different types of tools. First loss capital, technical assistance, grant financing. In the case of our partnership with IKEA, raise philanthropy and invest as long-term patient capital. I'm talking 10, 15-year capital, equity, and debt to give entrepreneurs the time to accompany their farmers. Be clear and accountable to how we measure impact and not just financial returns. And increasingly, which we can talk about later, look at some of the other opportunities, even with carbon markets, because we will not solve these problems with business as usual. And yet, we have everything that we need, also to Jessica's point, in terms of technologies, knowledge, skills. We need the will, and we need to be more ecumenical in the way that we think about structuring capital to meet the needs of the day.
Great, thank you very much. So the number of tools in the toolbox required is what I really heard there, not a one-size-fits-all solution. So, and Jacqueline, you also talked about the importance of inclusion. So Agnes, turning to you, AGRA are working with a very specific group, of course, that are crucial for inclusion, women, right? So what more can we do? What can AGRA do more of to reach those female farmers? And how can we then incentivize farmers more broadly to better adopt regenerative agriculture and productive use of renewable energy practices?
Thank you. I guess the biggest irony of this whole farming systems and food production system that we find ourselves in today is it doesn't deliver value to the people that need it the most, whether it is smallholder farmers and women, or whether smallholder farmers or women. So the biggest challenge here is AGRA as an institution really was set up to take advantage of basically some form of straitjacket thinking around green revolution. You have the seeds, you have the fertilizers, you have the water, and boom, you have the yield. But we are working in different times. We are working at times when a continent like ours has some of the most eroded soils. Producing becomes extremely difficult. Soil carbon is very low. When climate change makes it very difficult to think about what production systems in the past that were successful actually will look like in the future. So that puts women at a huge disadvantage. Women are people that survive on using as little as possible, especially in this environment. They don't have land, so they optimize what they have. They don't have access to financing, so whatever they get must go very far. So here, regenerative agriculture and the opportunity within the regenerative food system is really trying to understand how we can help women manage with less, how they can manage the little soil they are using and little land they are sitting on, and how they can take every small financing they get, go very far. What we've tried to do as AGRA today, we are working with around 106,000 smallholder farmers in Kenya. It's actually supported by IKEA Foundation. 60% of those farmers are women. And we've seen that for those farmers, when you do give them an opportunity to have the ability to recycle, and here we'll be talking about energy, and it's not easy to recycle when you're a farmer, and part of what you are recycling is what you need for energy. So when they have that ability to recycle, when that does happen, they actually have been able to produce 30% more than farmers who are not doing that recycling and putting carbon back in the soil. It has become so clear to us and so important that carbon is vitally important in this regenerative system. But we need to empower women to be able to have access to these materials. So there's this mechanism of trying to build that capital. How do you build that capital? That natural resource capital that allows women to have stuff to put back in the soil. Whether it is water that they can recycle and take back to the soil, it needs energy, it needs labor, it needs financing that they have very little of. How do you ensure that they have that volume of material that helps them build better volume? They are competing with animals for that volume. They are competing with firewood for that volume. So what we've come up with is we have two programs. One of them, Value for Her, is a program that really focuses on understanding how we can strengthen women businesses trying to survive in this food system ecosystem. We give them extension, we give them knowledge, we give them access to technologies, drought-tolerant varieties and all that, so that they can start building a base that they are growing on. They are already going to the bank. They are already trying to find money. But how do you ensure that this money goes further? How do you ensure that this money really helps them build a base? So that is one of the programs, and we can talk more about a little bit more about it later. But then the other program is just being extremely intentional, recognizing that today women produce 30% less than the next neighbor farmer who is a man, and mostly because the decisions that they need to make to enhance yield are not being made by them. So just being very intentional around how we facilitate those decisions, but also how we ensure that the power and the authority and the ability, and all those things sound like a lot, but they can actually happen, can be put in the hands of farmers when they make that decision to grow the crop that they feel is suitable for them to grow. Growing cowpeas as opposed to growing maize, growing beans as opposed to growing maize. Those decisions that are more nutrition related than financial are extremely important. So we empower women to have that opportunity. And hopefully this will create something that, as what some of the colleagues were saying earlier, that can be scaled to other areas.
Mm-hmm. So much there, Agnes. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I hope we'll come back to it in a second. Maybe going back to you then, Jacqueline. I mean, what we're hearing is really, we can't go on with business as usual, right? Things are in need of significant change, and one of those is the decoupling of food production from energy-intensive practices, right? So, can you provide any examples of businesses doing this already in your portfolio? And the big questions again: how can we mainstream? How can we scale? How can we replicate and build on successes?
Sure, Simon, and just to really kick home that point that Agnes is really focused on the individual farmers. We're focused on growing the companies. Jessica and IKEA Foundation focused on essentially supporting the ecosystem. We need these role models and we need these business models. And the exciting thing for me is really for the first time we are seeing agriculture companies working on resilience and adaptation for smallholders in fighting climate change. They're scaling. When we are more ecumenical about the kind of capital that the companies can resource so that they can reach the farmers. The two quick examples, one would be a company called Sun Culture, which sells solar-powered water pumps that displace polluting diesel pumps and reduce reliance on unreliable rain-fed irrigation. So solar irrigation allows farmers to improve their yield, sometimes 3 to 4x what they were producing previously. It allows them to diversify their crops and farm under extreme temperatures. The company enables the farmers to pay according to what you would call pay as you go, where they might pay every day or on a weekly basis, rather than have to just pay in loans that don't necessarily make sense given the harvest. Already this company has impacted more than 250,000 people. But what's interesting is to see its growth curve and how it moved skyward once it was able to tap into some government support and, importantly, the carbon markets. And what excites me is that the founder, Samir Ibrahim, makes a powerful argument that a combination of equity, debt, some government support, and carbon subsidies based on the diesel replacement that they're able to do with the solar, therefore reducing carbon emissions, if done correctly, could enable a country like Kenya to become food self-sufficient when you see the radical transformation at the farm level. And I have now met many of those farmers who are improving their incomes, creating jobs, and really making change. So we have to think differently, and as Agnes said, also think about how we ensure that we include women farmers and making this type of access accessible to them too. In India, we invested in a company called S4S. This is a company that essentially sells solar dryers. So using the sun to dry foodstuffs like onions, garlics, tomatoes. There are these small dryers that are typically sold to 2 or 3 women from local communities. They create what's called these tiny solar hubs that then resource and support about 150 women, it's all women, smallholder farmers. They collect their produce, they dry it, and then the company transports the goods to nearby packaging and distribution warehouses. They're already working with about 300,000 farmers while increasing their income significantly, reducing their costs, and certainly reducing the carbon footprint, not only in terms of the lack of food wastage, but in terms of the transport costs, because when you dry these vegetables and now even fruits, obviously you have much less volume, much less weight to transport. And we've seen some of the hub income farmers triple their income. It was thrilling last year when this company was awarded the Earthshot Prize. We need more examples of these kinds of companies that truly are not just paying lip service to being good for people and planet, but truly are doing that in ways that are scaling solutions from the bottom up.
Yeah, great, Jacqueline. Thank you. And SMV, we also have a great partnership with Sun Culture in Kenya. I believe SMV and Acumen, we may even be collaborating together on a relationship with a group called Soko Fresh in Kenya, preservation of horticultural produce in a country where about 50% of that produce doesn't make it to market because it gets spoiled, and they've come up with a solar cooling system. So there are indeed these fabulous examples, but the challenge is, again, mobilizing the right forms of financing through to the right people at the right time in the right context, isn't it? And that's where those pay-as-you-go models come in, but they need to be scaled. Jessica, perhaps turning to you then, and again, the IKEA Foundation have been such enablers of collaboration. If I think of some of the sort of leadership at COP to support the food systems pavilion and the linkages between food systems and climate action, and really putting that on the agenda. How does this impact climate plans and targets when it comes to measured focus on agriculture and land use? And do you think we're really starting to witness a wider food systems action taking place, and a decoupling from fossil fuels, if I can put it that way?
Yes, I think we see steps in the right direction. I think COP28 was actually a movement in itself. And of course, every action counts, in my belief. But we have a sense of urgency, and we need to see this accelerate. And we need to be clear that our food system is not sustainable nor working for people and planet going forward. I think according to the Global Alliance for the Future of Food, all the facts are telling us that industrial food in itself stands for 15% of the fossil fuel emission every year. And talking about, opportunities, I think we have a lot of opportunities, but it also requires a lot of responsibility to step in and really take actions. Just to mention a few, we need to phase out fossil fuel in the agrochemicals. When it comes to fertilizers, we need to find new ways in the way of how to explore and drive the more organic and in the way of sustainable way of producing that. I think we need to shift to renewable energy in many different parts of this value chain. And I'm so happy because I heard some example now from Jacqueline and also from Agnes, right? Because we need to have renewable solutions when it comes to cooling, heating, drying and food processing, and also when it comes to packaging, but as well as in retail consumption and waste. And I think transport was another thing that came up, which is also a very important component. And at the same time, we actually need to support new behaviors. We need to introduce a plant-based or rich diet and minimize processed food. And as well as review policies, we need to track and address corporate impact. And also we need to support just transition. But just to saying that, it's a long list, right? We can read a lot of facts in the reports. And I think it's there. We all are aware about it. We were clear at COP28. I think we are really seeing a movement. I think we all understand why we need to do this. We are quite clear about many of the what we need to do and what it actually takes from everyone as part of the ecosystem. But we need to organize ourselves around the how. And here I think, the key learning is what we see is that it's essential to design programs where energy and agriculture connect. And the food system transformation is not one size fits all. And it's a need of a deep understanding about the local context. Because from a farmer perspective, and I think we can hear both Jacqueline and Agnes describing that it doesn't matter if it's an energy or an agriculture component. It's all about the needs and the improve of your livelihood. So I think it's very important that we start now to act and take the responsibility that's required, and that we are loud and proud also, like sharing in this forum, what it actually takes for everybody to step in now and really follow an arc, like who's accountable, responsible, and who's really contributing in order to do more around what works and really create an impact that we wish to see with that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So that's a nice segue back to you, Agnes. And, one of the clear pathways to scaling here is through governments and governmental policy, right? And Jessica, you've been talking about nexus, productive use of renewable energy and regenerative agriculture and those nexus points, but we all like our kind of structures, and at times the structures can be quite rigid. Agnes, you've been a minister, you have an extensive array of networks at government levels right across Africa and indeed beyond. How much appetite is there really to start adopting these nexus approaches, and then what more can be done to help inform those policies and practices to, further catalyze the scaling that we've been touching on?
No, thank you. Building on what my colleagues have said, I guess one of the biggest challenges of the food system, especially here in Africa to date, is the inability so far to incorporate energy in the food system. Now, the biggest opportunity is the fact that now we can actually take renewable energy at pretty small scales and get it into the food system without having to worry about the huge infrastructure cost that usually comes with getting major energy projects going. Basically, things like we have here in Africa, we have things like rural electrification programs that is millions of dollars, but still does not get does not get energy into the food system. So the opportunity, and many of them, Jacqueline has called them out, whether it is how we do solar-powered irrigation, how we do solar-powered tilling, how we do solar-powered drying and cold storage. I particularly like drying and cold storage because it has an extra element of introducing health in the system. Because if farmers don't have that ability to maintain food with energy, they are going to use some chemical somewhere. And energy does provide a huge opportunity to really conserve, whether it is through solar drying. A lot of solar drying does save a lot on pesticides post-harvest. But also on the cold storage side, you really give the plant the opportunity to outlive chemicals for some time. So there's huge benefits. What we need to do from a government perspective, again, we need to overcome that previous infrastructure challenge where the energy either belong to the Ministry of Energy or Ministry of Infrastructure. And these are things that you really struggle. Even today, you struggle to make a case for a road to go to smallholder farmers. So just imagine energy. You have no road going to smallholder farmers. You have no energy going to smallholder farmers. But the opportunities in some of the things that are beginning to happen. So what we are seeing on the ground is there are policies that can be made, and governments are already making them, to share the cost of solar energy for smallholder farmers, solar powered pumps. And again, a lot of this is driven by climate change. But you know what? So if it brings it on, so be it. So like the government of Rwanda, for example, just passed a program where they pay 70% of the cost of solar-powered irrigation systems, and the farmer paid 30%. That will get energy to the system faster than we have been doing today. We need to do more. We need to, especially for women, the power tillers are extremely important. I mean, you talked about, Jacqueline, you talked about where you put a coin in the power tiller and it tills part of your land, and that goes a long way. Being able to support women with that labor that is usually not available goes a long way. So what we are trying to see from an AGRA perspective is what type of policies can we start thinking about that actually can make this landscape viable. From a knowledge perspective, we are working with the governments to institutionalize VBAs. VBAs are village-based advisors to make sure that extension is becoming available. And regenerative agriculture needs a lot of extension. It needs a lot of explaining a lot of stuff. It needs a lot of follow-up. So you need extension to work. So here in Kenya, some of the counties are beginning to take on regenerative. I mean, the VBA, that model of bringing extension closer to the farmer, they're beginning to take it on. Land and land policy issues, we are beginning to look at land tenure and how protecting the land from a regenerative agriculture perspective is part of the incentive of a person who does, let me put it differently, ownership of the land is part of the incentive to protect and invest in the land. Farmers don't invest in the land that they don't own, right? So however small the land is, farmers will do more. They will go out of their way. They will terrace the land. They will prevent erosion. They will find whatever they need to find to put on the land to rebuild it. And those incentives are better and are going to happen better if governments put in place policies that ensure land tenure for farmers. And then producing more with what you have is also increasing productivity is also going to happen better if land tenure is more defined. I've had farmers who tell you, I can't put this in this land because I'll not be here next season. So policies like that are also going to be extremely important. So, and then monitoring what we need to do, what we are doing, and the work, part of the work we are doing with the IKEA Foundation is just trying to understand what does it take to transform a system from a regenerative perspective. And how do you use that as evidence of what that can change from a policy perspective? So if you can show a government that actually farmers that are living on the edge of drought, that are able to use more regenerative farming, that are able to rebuild their soil carbon, they're able to have a crop where other farmers can't have a crop. This will become policy. So we are investing in regenerative agriculture mostly to generate that type of evidence so that we can help policymakers make those decisions. But also show value. Women farmers in particular will not be able to invest in regenerative agriculture if they don't get the first 2 years of support, because it needs a whole lot of support system to be able to get the right type of capital investments to invest in regenerative agriculture. It takes some time. So if we can be very deliberate around linking whatever credit system, linking that credit system to even higher credit for farmers that are struggling, like women farmers, we will benefit the system even better. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Jacqueline, you're sort of looking like you might want to come back in on that point, on credit.
No, just how much I appreciate Agnes in a way, just reinforcing this idea that we will only solve these problems if we recognize that some form of subsidy is needed. It is a very small amount of subsidy that can be transformative. And so if, again, we start with the fact that smallholder farmers are the producers of our food, this is where the food system starts, and we acknowledge them as customers as well as producers, we can structure inputs and capital in a way that creates real sustainability at the farm level, at the company profitability level, so that we have ongoing entities. and therefore at the systemic level, but it will take all different players. And this is truly where IKEA Foundation stands apart. We need more foundations like that to build these kinds of business models and, frankly, systemic role models. So thank you, Agnes.
Yeah. And if I may, I'll come back in then with a question to any of you, but particularly back to what you were saying, Agnes, that I wonder if how much of it is about the establishment of the policies and the policy frameworks, or is it also, or even more about establishing the incentives for the existing policies to be implemented, if that makes sense?
I think it's both. Existing policies that need to be implemented. For example, if I just give one at random, we do have good technologies out there that can be enhanced. And what is missing is the right mix of things for communities to access them. And again, Jacqueline talked about this a little bit. What do you mix to make technologies that are already available can scale? And again, these have to be business models at village level. We can have solar powered irrigation as a business model at a village level that provides a service. We can have power tillers that are solar powered as business models that can power these villages. So how do we design them as business models? We provide the knowledge. We start with that, but we also must provide the capital. So it's bringing that together. And then the policy incentives will come on top of that. How do you secure these things once you establish them? How do you secure? From a macro policy perspective, which is the politics of the day, you must scale, you must reach many people. That's where the subsidies come in. From a micro policy perspective, you must protect the businesses that are in this environment so that they can make money. Otherwise, they will not be in the environment.
Yeah. Thank you, Agnes. And, if we had more time, I'd love to tell you about the thousands of examples we have of, going to a solar household system through a pay-as-you-go model, the economic viability of it, the savings that are generated from going from wood burning to kerosene to candles to a solar system, the economic product. The frustrating thing here is it's a proven economically viable model, but the instruments don't yet don't exist at the scale that is necessary to enable us to expand. Okay, Jessica, let's go just round the screen if we can. 1 minute each. Key highlight, key closing remark from each of you.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think we need to be loud and proud in regards to evidence and the holistic business model. I added that on actually when I was listening to you because I think it's so important. I think we need to accelerate what works, and that goes together with the first point. I think we need to leverage on the momentum from COP28 and really put expectations on all actors and the whole ecosystems. And last but not least, I think we need to make sure that we have the end user in the center of all solutions. The human-centric design is key to sustainable long-term food system transformation. And it needs to be affordable and accessible because that's the key for this to work. So all need to come together and focus on that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jacqueline.
I'm all in on loud and proud. It has taken the world a long time, but we have the business models now. Simon, what you said at the end is that we don't have the instruments yet. We actually have the capital instruments. We need more capital. Our companies have reached 230 million people with off-grid solar electrification, and this can scale. Again, it's about finding the right kind of capital to solve problems in ways that enable low-income people at village level to solve their own problems. Connected to that then is to remember that we are talking about the people who feed the world who are also most vulnerable and least responsible for climate change. And so this is about our productivity, and this is also about our shared humanity. And finally, in a way, continuing to echo Jessica and Agnes, because I think you're hearing the same messages. We have the capital, skills, knowledge, tools to transform our systems, what is lacking too often is what we call the moral imagination. The understanding farmers at their level and building from that perspective and the will. And so when we do that, and we acknowledge that no, it won't just be business, it won't just be government, it won't just be philanthropy, but it will take all of us, that we can truly show the world that we can do hard things.
Thank you very much. Agnes.
I'm one of those people that found it difficult at the beginning to believe in the regenerative agriculture. I grew up on a farm. I know all these practices that farmers do every day. And I grew up seeing them not changing their lives. And I guess there's one really simple explanation. The amount of effort and intensity that it requires to rebuild carbon, soil carbon, is huge for a typical farmer. But there are things that can make it move faster. Thing that can make it move faster is the type of partnerships we build around that, as we've demonstrated here, and get farmers, smallholder farmers, to have that take-off speed, when a combination of public-private partnerships can actually ensure that that take-off speed happens, because once it does, actually farmers become sustainable. But the thing that is missing in all this mix that I see, that we really need to work hard on, is to bring in private sector in ways that incentivizes farmers to be part of this. That I want to make sure that a farmer prefers to produce millet regeneratively because they have a market, rather than do the usual stuff because it's like whatever I produce is whatever I produce. So if we can bring in private sector in ways that they feel a responsibility towards, they feel a responsibility to this farmer who is rebuilding our soils, our world, I think we can do so much further together. And I feel here, as we talk today, we are beginning to get there, and we need to bring more people on board so that it's not the farmer alone. It's not something that is put on this poor person's back alone to rebuild our world.
There you go. Thank you so much. So we're only 60 seconds or so over time. I love that, Agnes, at the end, the kind of call to action. We're on a journey. We know that. We know we desperately need to accelerate and scale that journey. Jacqueline, that, a call to having the moral imagination, as you put it, and Jessica, putting the end users at the center. Goodness, amazing, isn't it, that we're still saying that, and it's so important that we walk that talk more. And if we do that and then mobilize the capital, Jacqueline, that you say does exist in the right ways, using our moral imagination, we'll make further progress. So, hey, thank you very, very much, and to be continued.